Our dumb, disgusting, boring protagonist, Han Jung-woo, did not have the luxury of growing up in a comfortable environment like his peers. Because of his difficult background, his school years were spent being treated like an invisible man, completely ignored by everyone around him. At the time, he naively believed this harsh treatment was simply due to the immaturity of his classmates, assuming that once he grew up and secured a job at a reputable company, everything would finally turn around. Now, an adult, Jung-woo has made it into a major company housed in a grand high-rise building called Ocean Square. However, reality quickly crushes his hopes. While standing in the office hallway holding his work documents, a passing coworker rudely shoulders right past him, without even giving him a glance. The sudden impact catches Jung-woo off guard, causing his neatly organized papers to slip from his grasp and scatter across the floor. Jung-woo immediately stammers out an apology to the back of the retreating coworker, but the man doesn't even bother to stop or acknowledge him. Left completely ignored, Jung-woo is forced to crouch down on the floor to pick up his scattered papers, realizing that his invisible status has followed him into his professional life. As he is kneeling on the floor gathering his documents, two female coworkers walk by, entirely engrossed in their gossip about a recent event. They pay so little attention to their surroundings that one of them steps her sharp high heel directly onto one of Jung-woo's fallen papers. Jung-woo gasps in surprise, as his hard work is literally trampled underfoot, yet the two women continue walking as if nothing happened. Unable to take the disrespect any longer, Jung-woo quickly stands up and calls out to get their attention. The two women stop and turn around, but instead of apologizing, they glare at him with incredibly annoyed and hostile expressions. Intimidated by their intense and judging looks, Jung-woo's confidence instantly evaporates, and he meekly mutters that it is nothing at all. Seeing him back down so easily, the women scoff at him, whispering about how this guy can't even speak up properly. They walk off complaining about why an idiot like him is standing around in such a cramped area with a dumb look on his face. Left standing in the hallway with his crumpled papers, Jung-woo realizes with a heavy heart that nothing has truly changed, and he is still being treated like a ghost. Just as Jung-woo is wallowing in his misery, the distinct sound of footsteps echoes through the office, drawing the immediate attention of the nearby employees who eagerly greet the newcomer as their team leader. The person approaching is none other than team leader Seo Mi-ju. She walks straight over to Jung-woo and asks what exactly he is doing down on the floor. Startled, Jung-woo looks up and is immediately flustered to see his superior standing right before him. Trying to save face, Jung-woo nervously scratches his head and explains that he simply dropped some documents he was printing and was in the middle of gathering them. Instead of scolding him or walking away like the others, Seo Mi-ju looks at the papers scattered across the floor, kneels down, and calmly begins helping him pick them up. Kneeling on the office floor, team leader Seo Mi-ju inspects the scattered pages and asks if they make up the report she requested earlier. Jung-woo nervously confirms that it is indeed the document she mentioned, prompting his superior to sigh in frustration at how selfish their colleagues are, noting that someone should have stepped up to help him. She then instructs Jung-woo to gather the pages and bring them to her desk immediately. Although Jung-woo hesitantly points out that he has not yet had a chance to double-check the draft, Mi-ju dismisses his concerns, insisting that it is fine, and leaving the anxious young man wondering what she plans to do next. Once at her desk, Mi-ju sits down comfortably and begins reviewing the documents, while a visibly tense Jung-woo stands waiting in front of her. After scanning the pages, Mi-ju looks up at him and directly asks if he was truly the one who wrote the document. When Jung-woo nervously confirms that he did, Mi-ju bluntly delivers a crushing blow, stating that his work is absolute garbage. She goes on to criticize every aspect of his effort, explaining that the formatting is a complete disaster and the content is pathetic, even going so far as to say an elementary school student could easily produce a superior draft. Watching his confidence crumble, she asks if he seriously believed she would ever accept such trash. Terrified and desperate, Jung-woo tries to defend himself by explaining that he was actually trying to find a senior colleague to review his draft first, but everyone in the office claimed to be far too busy to help him. Mi-ju quickly shuts down his excuses, telling him to stop worrying about getting a review because she is talking about the absolute basics of office work. She sternly lectures him that these are fundamental skills he should have mastered before entering the workforce, reminding him that the office is not a school. As Jung-woo quietly apologizes, Mi-ju dismisses his regret, remarking that she should have expected this kind of subpar effort from him. She then mutters a sharp, demeaning comment about how this is precisely the problem with hiring high school graduates, a low blow that causes Jung-woo to flinch in deep humiliation and quietly clench his jaw in anger. To make her point brutally clear, Mi-ju grips the paper draft with both hands and tears his hard work completely in half. As the torn pages fall, she lectures him that since it was apparently easier for him to get hired than everyone else, he should be working twice as hard as his peers instead of looking for shortcuts. She expresses her disappointment, stating that he appears to be taking his position for granted. Shoving the torn remnants of his report directly into his chest, she orders him to rewrite the entire document from scratch and have it waiting on her desk before she arrives at work the following morning. When a panicked Jungwoo tries to voice his worry about the impossibly tight deadline, Miju cuts him off, demanding that he ensure it is flawless this time and asking if he clearly understands her instructions. After receiving his harsh punishment, Jungwoo can only swallow his pride and quietly acknowledge his superior's demands. Just as he prepares to leave, another female coworker named Haina approaches the desk to discuss the upcoming meeting with the executives. However, as Haina begins explaining in addition to the meeting agenda, she suddenly stops in shock, noticing that something is seriously wrong with the team leader's outfit. Confused, Miju looks down to see what has caught her colleague's attention. Miju is startled to discover a massive tear running down the leg of her exercise stockings, likely caused when she knelt on the hard office floor earlier to help Jungwoo. Instantly irritated by this proper wardrobe, she decides to project her frustration onto the easiest target available, our resident workplace punching bag, loudly calling out Jungwoo's name just as he is trying to walk away. With no regard for professional boundaries or Jungwoo's dignity, Miju proceeds to slide the ripped exercise stockings off her legs right there at her desk. Holding the discarded thick stockings in her hand, she casually orders Jungwoo to take them and throw them in the trash along with his shredded report. Jungwoo stands frozen, utterly dumbfounded as he is forced to hold his boss's discarded stockings. Showing zero patience, Miju snaps at him to hurry up, complaining that her arm is getting tired from holding them out. To make matters worse, the quiet sound of snickers and whispering echoes from the surrounding cubicles. Standing there as the laughingstock of the office, Jungwoo is crushed by the overwhelming realization that he is being completely ostracized and looked down on by everyone at the company, while Miju simply looks at him with a smug, mocking expression. After tossing the ruined documents and the stockings into the trash bin, Jungwoo returns to his desk, completely seething with quiet rage. He realizes that her brief moment of kindness in the hallway was just a bizarre facade, and he curses his terrible luck under his breath. He clenches his teeth in pure frustration, wondering how he is supposed to succeed when absolutely nobody in this place has bothered to train or teach him a single thing. He feels deeply insulted that team leader Seo Miju chose to humiliate him so ruthlessly in front of the entire department. As he sits there, the memory of her condescendingly handing over her exercise stockings plays over and over in his mind, fueling his building resentment. He thinks about how, if he truly had his way, he would make her pay for this disrespect. Finally reaching his absolute breaking point, Jungwoo lets his pent-up fury take over, resulting in a chaotic outburst where papers are sent flying through the air as a startled scream echoes across the office. In the depths of his intense frustration, Jungwoo lets his mind drift into a vivid daydream where he exacts his ultimate revenge on his arrogant boss. In this wild fantasy, he subjects team leader Seo Miju to a grueling, high-intensity training session right in the office. In his imagination, she is completely overwhelmed, breathlessly demanding to know why she should have to endure this kind of conditioning session and questioning if she looks like someone he can just push around. As she desperately calls out his name and begs to talk things out, the fantasy version of Jungwoo remains completely relentless. He firmly grips her hands and prepares to initiate a strenuous full-body training sesh, ignoring her frantic apologies as she struggles to keep up with the pacing of his demanding self-training routine. Miju continues to gasp in sheer shock as Jungwoo's imaginary workout pushes her to her absolute limits. Shocked that he would perform such high-intensity fitness conditioning right in the workplace, she finds herself completely at his mercy. To keep her from disrupting the office, the daydream version of Jungwoo swiftly silences her by stuffing the exercise stocking into her mouth. He tells her that this is direct payback for all the nonsense she spewed earlier, wishing for her to taste the exact same humiliation he had to suffer. With total dominance, he drives the conditioning session to its peak, completely breaking her pride in his mind. Of course, reality quickly pulls Jungwoo out of his daydream, and he lets out a heavy sigh as he sits back in his quiet office chair. He reflects on how much he would love to actually do that, but immediately realizes it is completely out of the question. Getting hired at a prestigious company like this was incredibly difficult for him, and quitting just because the job is miserable is a luxury he simply cannot afford. Knowing that someone of his background could normally never dream of working here, he acknowledges that he only got the job out of sheer luck. With a mountain of credit card debt and ongoing expenses to pay off, this poor idiot has no choice but to stick it out, typing away on his keyboard with the naive hope that things will eventually get better. As the clock on the wall ticks past 9, Jungwoo's stomach begins to growl, prompting him to take a quick break and hit the local convenience store for a bite to eat. Stepping out into the cool night air, he lets out a heavy sigh, fully resigned to the fact that he is not going home tonight since he has to pull an all-nighter to finish rewriting the entire report. While drinking a cold beverage outside the convenience store to clear his head, Jung-woo suddenly hears voices nearby. He lowers his drink and glances down the street, only to spot a group of people standing outside a nearby establishment. As he looks closer, his eyes widen in realization as he recognizes some very familiar faces. Outside a restaurant, Jung-woo's co-workers stand together chatting in high spirits. A male colleague warmly praises team leader Seo Miju for her hard work, to which she modestly replies that everyone was simply having a great time. The colleague expresses his appreciation for the team-building dinner, noting how pleasant it is to finally gather after such a long time. Miju readily agrees, adding that things had been quite hectic for a while due to human resources, though she had personally wanted to host this gathering much sooner. Watching this scene unfold from a distance, Jung-woo is frozen in absolute disbelief. He realizes with a sinking heart that the entire department has gone out for a team-building dinner, a social event he was deliberately excluded from and never told about. His pain only deepens when he overhears Miju casually remarking to the group that if they hadn't been burdened with a certain bad apple, they probably would have organized this dinner much sooner. One of the female co-workers voices a slight hesitation, asking if it is truly safe for them to continue excluding Jung-woo, wondering if he might report their toxic behavior to the higher-ups. Her concerns are immediately dismissed by a male colleague, who laughs mockingly and asks if anyone honestly thinks Jung-woo has the courage to do such a thing. The man arrogantly suggests that Jung-woo should go ahead and report them if he wants, arguing that management would never take his side anyway and likely wants the poor guy to resign as quickly as possible. The male colleague chuckles, noting how much Miju seems to have it out for Jung-woo. Showing her true venomous colors, Miju coldly declares that she utterly despises people who do not know their place. She sneers that if it weren't for the special high school graduate hiring program, Jung-woo would never have even set foot in this company, questioning how someone like him dares to act as their equal. She goes on to mock his background as an orphan, stating that they belong to an entirely different social class than unsophisticated trash like him. She instructs the group that there is absolutely no need to treat him with kindness, urging them to continue isolating him and promising to personally cover for them. The male colleague nods in agreement, smugly suggesting that if Jung-woo can take a hint, he will eventually quit the job on his own, while the other female co-worker giggles and admits she would be thrilled to never see him again soon. Hidden in the shadows, Jung-woo listens to every hateful word, realizing with absolute clarity that the team leader herself was the mastermind behind all the bullying and ostracization he suffered from day one. Shaking with pure rage, he crushes the metal can in his hand, cursing their cruelty and wondering how these people can treat another human being like this without a shred of shame. As his fury reaches its boiling point, a glowing blue digital screen suddenly materializes in the air right before his eyes. The holographic prompt states that their disregard has officially reached its limit. Jung-woo's eyes widen in sheer bewilderment as a second notification flashes, declaring that he has officially awakened as an outsider. Left completely dumbfounded, Jung-woo can only stare at the floating interface, wondering what on earth this mysterious system is. Still reeling from the shock of his sudden awakening, Jung-woo stares at the glowing screen declaring his new status as an outsider. Before he can even begin to process what this means, a massive surge of energy courses through him, causing him to let out a loud, panicked scream that echoes down the street. The sudden outburst instantly startles his nearby coworkers, who spin around in confusion, looking for the source of the noise. As the group looks around the empty street, they murmur about the strange noise, admitting that it completely caught them off guard. Nearby, Jung-woo's crushed aluminum can clatters to the ground, drawing their attention. One of his colleagues asks if anyone else just heard a voice, prompting Jung-woo to quickly cover his mouth in shock. As his own footsteps echo softly on the pavement, he realizes something impossible is happening. In his panic, Jung-woo finds himself standing close to Seo Miju, nearly brushing shoulders with his hostile boss. He waits for her to lash out, but she simply glances around, casually remarking to the others that there must be a drunkard wandering nearby. Jung-woo's mind is absolutely blown as he realizes that she is looking directly in his direction but cannot see him at all. One of the male co-workers suggests that since everyone has had a bit too much to drink, it is probably time for them to head home. Miju agrees, though she mentions that she left something back at the office and needs to stop by to retrieve it first. As she turns and walks right past him, another digital notification screen flashes before Jung-woo, confirming that his level 1 outsider mode has been activated, and he is indeed completely invisible. Seeing the undeniable proof of his new power, Jung-woo's fear instantly melts away, replaced by a quiet, cunning grin. Meanwhile, a slightly tipsy Miju stumbles back into the quiet office building. As she walks down the dimly lit hallway, she is suddenly startled when another woman calls out her name. Miju turns to see her fellow superior, team leader Song Chaewon, standing in the corridor. Chaewon mentions that she assumed Miju had already left work for the night, prompting Miju to explain that she was just about to, before asking Chaewon what she is still doing here. Chaewon smiles and explains that she had some leftover work to take care of, but is finally ready to head home as well. After bidding farewell to her fellow team leader, Seo Miju heads back down the hallway, letting out an annoyed click of her tongue. She slides open the door to her department's office, only to find the entire room bathed in pitch darkness. Stepping inside, she wonders what on earth Jungwoo is doing sitting in the dark, confidently assuming there is no way the slacker would have dared to go home. She looks around the dim room, calling out his name into the empty space. Realizing there is no response, Miju sighs in deep frustration, muttering that if someone has absolutely no natural talent, they should at least try to make up for it with sheer effort. Her annoyance quickly flares into anger as she realizes the young man has apparently skipped out on his overtime work, cursing his name under her breath for leaving so early. Little does she know, Jungwoo has followed her every single step of the way, standing just inches from her, in his newly active, completely invisible state. He watches her rage with a smug grin, completely amazed that she still has not noticed his presence at all. Realizing that he has indeed been blessed with an incredible, supernatural power, Jungwoo decides that this is the perfect tool to pay back every single ounce of disrespect, bullying, and disdain his haughty co-workers have shown him. Positioning himself directly behind his completely oblivious boss, Jungwoo decides to put his new abilities to the test. Without warning, his invisible hands reach out, initiating a sudden and endurance training session. Miju gasps in absolute shock, frozen in place as she feels a very real shock. She looks down in utter confusion, unable to comprehend what is happening as she experiences a high-intensity conditioning session with no visible trainer in sight. Deeply unsettled, Miju shivers in the dark office, gasping as she feels a bizarre feeling that makes her feel like someone is actively starting to train her. The phantom hands send a jolt of panic through her, causing her to let out a sharp, startled scream. Just as she cries out, team leader Song Chaewon, who was still nearby in the hallway, steps into the dark room and calls out Miju's name, asking what she is doing. Trying to hide her intense fluster, Miju quickly composes herself and asks Chaewon if she hadn't already gone home. Chaewon explains that she actually stayed because there was something specific she wanted to discuss. While they face each other, Miju's mind frantically races, desperately trying to make sense of the strange feeling she felt pressing against her head just moments earlier. Chaewon calmly brings up the business at hand, asking Miju if the presentation that Team 3 is preparing for tomorrow is going smoothly. Miju defensively confirms that everything is on track, but she immediately bristles, asking why the leader of Team 1 is suddenly showing so much interest in her team's projects. While Miju is distracted by the conversation, Jungwoo decides to take advantage of his invisible state once again. Annoyed that Chaewon chose this exact moment to butt in on his fun, he slips right back behind Miju and initiates another silent, firm grip training session. Miju squeaks in absolute terror, utterly horrified to realize that she is still feeling these highly sussy things while standing right in front of her colleague. Oblivious to the intense struggle Miju is experiencing, Chaewon pleads with her to stop being so cold, reminding her that they are all part of the same sales department and that her interest is only natural. Miju struggles to keep her voice steady, stammering out that the presentation preparations are flawless and suggesting that Chaewon simply wait until tomorrow to hear the full details. She lets out a tense, forced laugh to hide her mounting panic. As Miju desperately tries to maintain her professional facade, the invisible Jungwoo intensifies his conditioning session, catching her firmly from behind. Miju is internally screaming, frantically wondering what kind of invisible force is taking liberties with her right under her colleague's nose. Chaewon continues the conversation, asking if Miju is still harboring a grudge over their past conflict. She explains that the outcome was entirely beyond her control, as it was a direct order from the head of the department. Although she understands why Miju is upset that Chaewon secured the specific promotional item Miju wanted, she gently advises that they should keep their personal and professional lives separate. Standing directly behind them, the invisible Jungwoo absorbs this juicy gossip, realizing there is some major bad blood between the two superiors. He quietly chuckles to himself, thinking that given Miju's naturally terrible personality, it is completely expected that she would be constantly fighting with the other team leaders. Continuing her inquiries, team leader Chaewon asks if the Team 3 employee who was working so late was Jungwoo. She wonders why he was left organizing the files until such an ungodly hour, pointing out that such an important task shouldn't blindly be dumped onto their youngest, most inexperienced employee. In his invisible state, Jungwoo is shocked to realize that his malicious boss never mentioned any of this to him. Miju quickly puts on a fake, cheerful front, claiming that she had actually prepared everything in advance, and that Jungwoo had simply volunteered to do the work because he wanted to practice his skills. To deflect the attention away from herself, Miju takes a malicious jab at Chaewon, laughing and suggesting that since Chaewon only secured her current position thanks to outside help, she must suffer from a severe ability complex. Hearing her lie so blatantly about forcing him to do all that exhausting work, Jungwoo's blood completely boils with rage. Deciding to punish this terrible woman for her dishonesty, he channels his anger into a sudden, high-intensity wholesome training session, delivering a powerful strike to her head. The unexpected blow sends Miju screaming in pain as she crashes heavily onto the office floor, completely startling Chaewon, who frantically calls out her name in shock. Chaewon rushes over to the sprawled-out Miju, desperately asking if she is all right and what on earth is wrong with her. Panting on her hands and knees in the dark, Miju is utterly terrified and bewildered, wondering what invisible force is repeatedly attacking her. As Chaewon leans in to inspect her disheveled state, she lets out a heavy, disappointed sigh. Chaewon flatly asks Miju if she is completely drunk, lecturing her that she should have kept her drinking under control. She scolds her counterpart for drinking to the point of losing all self-control, and questions why she would even bother returning to the workplace in such an embarrassing state. Miju can only stammer in confusion, unable to explain the invisible assault without sounding completely insane. Standing nearby, the invisible Jungwoo watches the spectacle with immense satisfaction. Chaewon continues her lecture, pointing out how shameful it is that their youngest employee is staying late to finish his work diligently, while their team leader is stumbling around the office. Realizing that it is completely impossible to have a logical conversation with her drunken colleague, Chaewon bids Miju a cold farewell and leaves, shutting the door behind her and leaving a thoroughly dazed, shivering Miju alone in the dark. Once the meddlesome colleague has finally departed, Miju lets out a weary sigh, completely exhausted by the bizarre events of the evening. Hidden in the darkness, Jungwoo watches her with a satisfied, vengeful grin. He decides that now is the perfect opportunity to address her terrible, toxic personality, loosening his tie as he prepares to teach his arrogant boss a lesson she will never forget. Still feeling extremely tipsy, Miju stumbles slightly, quietly admitting to herself that she must be far more intoxicated than she realized. Anxious to escape the eerie office, she hurries to the main glass exit and grabs the handle, but to her absolute horror, the door refuses to budge. Shaking the handle in a panic, she desperately wonders why the door is suddenly locked tight, finding it completely impossible that such a bizarre malfunction could happen. Unbeknownst to her, the invisible Jungwoo is standing right beside the entrance, easily holding the door shut to completely trap her inside. Terrified and shivering on the floor, Miju pulls out her phone to search for the security room's number to call for help. Little does she know, the true nightmare is only just beginning. Suddenly, she flinches in shock as she feels a cold, mysterious energy drink dripping onto her mouth and fingers. Staring in utter confusion at the energy on her hand, she desperately tries to rationalize what is happening to her, entirely unaware that the invisible Jungwoo is standing directly over her, preparing her into a conditioning session. Deciding to target her arrogant mouth first, Jungwoo initiates a highly demanding endurance training session. He chuckles inwardly as he watches her struggle, reminding her in his thoughts of how she constantly used those very mouths to boss him around, criticize his work, and declare him completely hopeless. With absolute control over the situation, he mockingly wonders how it feels to have those rude behaviors subjected to his intense conditioning workshop, leaving the arrogant team leader utterly helpless in the dark. Jungwoo begrudgingly admits that despite her incredibly toxic and rude personality, his boss, Seo Miju, actually possesses an attractive appearance and a notable gym physique. He quietly reflects to himself that she is quite a beautiful woman whenever she manages to keep her mouth shut. On top of her looks, her professional capabilities are undeniably outstanding, which explains how she managed to secure a promotion to team leader at such a young age. This combination of appeal and career success makes her highly popular in the office, and Jungwoo notes that a significant number of men in the company openly admire her as she walks down the hallways. However, the narrative shifts back to the immediate crisis inside the dark office. While Jungwoo is in the middle of his stealthy activities, his eyes suddenly widen in pure shock as a glowing digital interface flashes directly in front of his face. The blue holographic prompt delivers some incredibly terrible timing, announcing that the time limit for his outsider mode has officially been reached and the invisibility power is about to end. This unexpected warning leaves the panicked protagonist in a state of absolute horror, realizing the utter disaster that would unfold if he is discovered. Fortunately, the lucky guy manages to pull back just as the invisibility completely fades away. Looking down, He sees team leader Seo Miju collapsed on the floor, panting heavily, and completely disheveled from the sheer intensity of his rigorous conditioning session. The sweat on the floor and her heels bears the evidence of the highly demanding training she just endured. Jungwoo lets out a shaky sigh of relief, quietly noting how incredibly close he came to getting caught red-handed. Standing over her, he observes her flushed, unresponsive state and wonders if the dramatic intensity of the fitness session actually caused the haughty team leader to faint right there on the spot. He nervously gulps, desperately hoping that she was too overwhelmed to notice his presence during the entire ordeal. The scene transitions to the following morning as a bright, sunny day begins at the Grand Ocean Square high-rise. Inside the busy office, the daily hustle is already in full swing as employees exchange their standard morning greetings. Walking through the department, Jungwoo notices a group of female coworkers huddled together, whispering and complaining about how annoying he is, likely still holding on to their petty biases. However, instead of letting their toxicity get to him, Jungwoo feels a quiet sense of relief, realizing from their ordinary gossiping that no strange stories or rumors about his activities have started circulating around the office. Just then, another female colleague passes right in front of him, but this time, Jungwoo remains calm and composed, casually offering a polite morning greeting as he walks past without letting his past anxieties hold him back. While Jungwoo is attempting to settle into his morning routine, a sharp, commanding voice suddenly cuts through the office chatter, calling out his name. Startled by the sudden summons, the nervous young man quickly responds in a fluster, shouting out his confirmation. He turns to find his formidable boss, team leader Seo Miju, standing nearby. Without offering any explanation, she coldly orders him to follow her straight to the meeting room. As she turns on her heel and walks away, a heavy wave of dread washes over the anxious protagonist. His mind races as he nervously tells himself there is absolutely no way she could have discovered his actions from the night before. Still, the poor idiot's heart hammers against his ribs as he follows her down the hallway, watching her march purposefully toward their destination. Reaching the meeting room door, Jungwoo hesitatingly turns the handle and steps inside the quiet space. Trying to gauge the situation, he tentatively calls out to his team leader. Miju keeps her back turned for a moment, coldly questioning what he thinks he is doing, especially since it is the very first thing in the morning. As Jungwoo steps closer, sweating profusely and trying to maintain his professional composure, Miju suddenly spins around with intense anger flashing in her eyes. Before the clueless guy can even react, she aggressively reaches out and firmly snatches him by his necktie. Completely caught off guard by the sudden contact, Jungwoo freezes in sheer shock. His furious superior glares at him with pure hatred, loudly calling him an absolute disgusting. Gripping his tie with an iron fist, she forcefully pulls him down toward her, leaving our completely startled protagonist staring with wide, terrified eyes as he wonders if his secret is officially out. The story jumps back to 1 hour prior to the confrontation, showing the Grand Ocean Square building bathed in the morning light. Haina, our bubbly but slightly oblivious colleague, arrives early for work and steps into the quiet department. She is immediately surprised to spot team leader Seo Miju already standing near her desk, looking unusually quiet. Greeting her superior, Haina comments on how exceptionally early she is, to which Miju turns around with a rather tired expression and calmly explains that she simply woke up early today. When Haina playfully replies that she is highly motivated to work hard and support her superior, Miju dryly tells her to stop with the cheap flattery. As they converse, Haina's sharp eyes narrow in suspicion as she looks closer at her boss. She notices with quiet astonishment that Miju is wearing the exact same dress from the previous day, a highly unusual choice for the normally pristine team leader. Unbeknownst to Haina, this stubborn boss is deeply distracted, trying to piece together the highly bizarre circumstances of her morning. From Miju's perspective, the start of her day makes absolutely no sense. She remembers that when she finally opened her eyes earlier that morning, she was completely shocked to find herself already at her office desk, having fallen asleep resting on her arms. Waking up in a groggy state, she had sat up abruptly in sheer panic, frantically questioning what was going on. As she desperately tries to recall the chaotic events of the previous night, a flood of vivid, highly unsettling memories rushes back. She realizes that those incredibly weird and intense events from yesterday were indeed real, though she finds herself thoroughly confused, since all of her clothes are still on her body. Touching her muscle hand to inspect herself, she struggles to believe that those spectral occurrences actually happened in reality. Yet, her body still remembers the absolute physical toll of the night. She vividly recalls being caught in the dark office, trapped against her desk, as an invisible force subjected her to an incredibly relentless, high-intensity training session. She remembers the invisible hands initiating a highly demanding full-body training sesh, pushing her endurance to its absolute limits as her body worked up an intense sweat. In her hazy memories, she was completely at the mercy of this phantom workout, experiencing a rigorous conditioning session that left her entirely breathless, shivering, and physically spent. Recalling the overwhelming intensity of that non-stop fitness conditioning, Miju is left trembling in the morning light, deeply unsettled by the extreme training routine that left her body thoroughly exhausted before she finally fainted. Returning to the high-stakes confrontation in the meeting room, team leader Seo Miju holds Jungwoo tightly by his necktie. Her mind is in absolute chaos as she frantically tries to determine if the intense experiences from the night before were actually real or if it was all just a wild, drunken dream. To find the answer to this puzzling mystery, she decides she must demand absolute honesty from her subordinate. Jungwoo, sweating profusely and clearly intimidated by her aggressive posture, stammers out, asking why on earth she is doing this to him. Miju quickly cuts to the chase, demanding to know if he was indeed the one who stayed back in the office late yesterday. After nervously gulping down his panic, our clever protagonist confirms that he was indeed working late. He explains that since she assigned him so much work, he had no choice but to pull overtime, calmly asking if there is a problem. Miju narrows her eyes, explaining that she had actually returned to the office briefly last night to take care of some business, but found the place completely empty. She claims she only managed to finish half of her work before having to rush home due to an unexpected emergency. As she studies his reaction, Miju realizes that the young man does not appear to be lying at all. She reflects on how she had already checked the building's security cameras earlier that morning, confirming that Jungwoo had left the premises as soon as her department's after-party ended and never returned. This leaves her highly frustrated, clenching her teeth as she realizes her suspicions might be entirely off base. Finding herself completely unable to ask him such a bizarre and highly embarrassing question about her spectral trainer, Miju grips his tie even tighter. Grasping at straws, she loudly demands to know if he saw anyone else behaving suspiciously near their workplace yesterday. Jungwoo quickly shakes his head, claiming he saw absolutely no one. Letting out a heavy, disappointed sigh, Miju finally releases her grip on his tie and concedes that she must have simply misunderstood the situation. She coldly dismisses him, telling him he is free to leave, which Jungwoo politely acknowledges before turning to make his exit. Once his back is turned to his hostile boss, a smug, triumphant grin spreads across Jungwoo's face. He quietly mocks his foolish superior, amused that she actually believed his simple alibi and thinking how absurd it was for her to try and intimidate him. However, his brief moment of victory is cut short the moment he slides the door open. He immediately freezes in surprise as he bumps directly into Haina, who was lingering nervously in the hallway. Haina explains that she happened to hear some incredibly loud and aggressive noises while passing by the room, anxiously asking if something bad had happened between them. Before a nervous Jungwoo can even stammer out a response, Miju quickly steps in to save face, plastering a fake, cheerful smile across her face as she assures Haina that absolutely nothing is wrong. She casually claims she was merely questioning Jungwoo about his progress on the report she requested. To make the cover story convincing, she asks Jungwoo where the physical draft is since he was supposed to bring it to her, catching the young man completely off guard as he suddenly realizes he needs to present the revised document immediately. An abrupt flashback reveals that last night, while lying comfortably in bed and basking in the excitement of his invisible revenge, our resident dumbass completely forgot to actually rewrite his assigned report. Cut back to the present meeting room, where team leader Seo Miju stares at him in sheer disbelief, realizing that he has not finished the assignment. Jungwoo can only sweat profusely, stammering as he tries to find a plausible explanation. Unfortunately for him, Miju's patience evaporates instantly. Her furious scream echoes loudly through the busy office, startling all of his nearby colleagues. Standing aggressively in front of him, she berates him in public, demanding to know if his job is some kind of joke to him. She lectures him that since he was officially accepted into the company, he has no right to act like a reckless part-timer who can just skip out on his duties. She continues her loud tirade, questioning if he possesses any sense of responsibility and pointing out how unacceptable it is to leave his tasks unfinished simply because he claims to be busy. With Haina standing awkwardly beside them, a humiliated Jungwoo bows his head and stammers out a weak apology. This only irritates Miju further, who snaps that she is sick of hearing his constant, useless apologies. She sternly commands him to remain focused, condescendingly telling him that the company only keeps him around because they are being incredibly lenient and warning him that no other workplace would ever tolerate such subpar behavior. Jungwoo grinds his teeth in silent humiliation, forced to swallow his pride once again. Crossing her arms, Miju wonders aloud how she can possibly trust someone who behaves like this. Fortunately for Jungwoo, Haena intervenes to save him from further public embarrassment, nervously reminding the team leader that their upcoming meeting rehearsal is about to start. Realizing she is running late, Miju quickly shifts her focus, giving Jungwoo a strict, final warning to finish the report and submit it to her desk before noon. To deliver one last painful jab to his pride, she orders him to stop showing everyone in the department how lacking he is compared to his peers. Grinding his teeth and bowing his head, the defeated protagonist can only quietly accept her terms. As Miju's footsteps fade down the hallway, Jungwoo stands completely frozen, his entire body shaking with pure, unbridled rage. He silently curses her name over and over in his mind, vowing that he will make her pay dearly for this public humiliation. Shortly after, the focus shifts to the executive presentation room inside Ocean Square. Now, dressed in a sleek blue jacket, team leader Seo Miju looks over her paperwork, noting with a sigh that the messy quality of the report is typical of Han Jungwoo's sloppy work after all. However, she quickly tells herself to stop complicating things with bizarre theories, firmly deciding that the strange events from the previous night were simply a wild dream caused by her heavy drinking. Pushing her personal thoughts aside to focus on the task at hand, she stands confidently at the podium to address the room. Welcoming her colleagues, she thanks everyone for taking time out of their busy schedules to attend, formally announcing that Recruitment Team 3 will now present their strategic plans for the second half of the year, while her rival, team leader Song Chae-won, watches closely from the audience. As the presentation proceeds inside the executive meeting room, some colleagues quietly whisper to one another, wondering where on earth Han Jungwoo has disappeared to. Meanwhile, team leader Seo Miju continues her pitch, explaining how their company's distribution channels allow them to utilize products that competitors cannot access. However, she is suddenly interrupted by her rival, team leader Song Chae-won. Pointing out a potential issue in the slides, Chae-won questions whether those brands could truly withstand the pressure of utilizing 400 million on each brand every season as stated in the PowerPoint. Quickly trying to regain her footing, Miju confidently explains that, even if a brand is famous nationwide, those factors alone cannot guarantee success. Standing at the podium, she proudly notes that they possess their own unique weapon, which is the valuable business network they have built up over the past 30 years. But just as she is about to finish her sentence, Miju suddenly gasps in shock, her face turning bright red as she flinches at the podium. Seeing her unusual reaction, a puzzled Chae-won asks if she is all right. Miju quickly tries to cover her immense fluster, embarrassedly apologizing and claiming that her throat simply got a bit stuffy. Chae-won politely advises her to drink some water to clear her throat, which Miju shakily acknowledges as she tries to compose herself. In her mind, Miju is absolutely panicking. She desperately tells herself that there is no way this can possibly be happening, having firmly convinced herself that the terrifying events from the previous night were just a drunken dream. However, she is instantly forced to face reality as she feels the distinct, highly proper touch of phantom hands slipping past her defenses to initiate a highly intensive, unexpected workplace conditioning session. To her absolute horror, the completely invisible Jungwoo has materialized directly behind her at the podium, wearing a smug, vengeful grin. He mockingly reminds her of her own words about how incredibly important today's executive meeting was, playfully wondering what would happen if her body reached its absolute physical training limits and she completely collapsed in front of everyone. With zero regard for the professional setting, our cheeky invisible trainer aggressively accelerates the full-body training sesh, initiating a highly demanding conditioning session and a relentless hand endurance workout. Poor Miju is pushed to her absolute limits, her face blushing furiously as she grips the podium for dear life. She struggles desperately to hold back her breathless gasps and maintain her professional facade, completely at the mercy of this silent, high-intensity workplace fitness routine, while the entire room watches her, entirely oblivious to the invisible workout occurring right before their eyes. During her high-stakes presentation, team leader Seo Miju suddenly lets out a sharp gasp, her face flushing a deep crimson as she desperately tries to keep her voice under control. Her highly visible distress immediately startles the audience, prompting her rival, Song Chae-won, to call out her name in concern. Snapping out of her daze with a panicked response, Miju is met with a cold look from Chae-won, who asks why she is suddenly zoning out and instructs her to continue. Trying to hide her overwhelming embarrassment, Miju quickly nods and tries to regain her focus. However, keeping her composure is proving to be an impossible task. Miju realizes with absolute horror that the bizarre spectral training from last night is indeed happening again right now. As her body shivers and twitches from the intense training, she frantically wonders what on earth she should do. Sensing her inner panic, the invisible Jungwoo positions himself right behind her, smugly thinking that if she stops the presentation now, everyone in the room will surely think she has completely lost her mind. Realizing that enduring this relentless conditioning session is her only viable option, Miju clenches her teeth and bravely announces to the room that she will continue, shakily attempting to explain their company's unique business weapon. But our cheeky invisible trainer has no intention of making it easy for her. Amused by her stubbornness, Jungwoo decides to step up the intensity of the workout, initiating a highly targeted fitness conditioning session. Miju squeaks internally as she feels his training, sending a jolt of shock through her body. Struggling to read her notes, she stammers out a few incoherent words about their 30-year distribution network. She feels absolutely revolted as the training escalates, with the invisible hands treating her muscles like a dumbbell. To make matters worse, Jungwoo pushes her endurance to its absolute limits by introducing a highly risky yoga workout from behind. Despite her body screaming from the sheer exhaustion of the non-stop fitness routine, Miju desperately tells herself that she must bear the training until the very end. Once the presentation finally wraps up, the surrounding male colleagues gather in the hallway, whispering among themselves about how incredibly strange and oddly flustered team leader Miju behaved during the meeting. Just then, Miju stumbles out into the corridor, looking completely spent, red-faced, and heavily disheveled. Hana spots her and tries to offer a friendly congratulations on her presentation, but a frantic Miju cuts her off mid-sentence, claiming she has to leave immediately as she rushes past. Hana is left standing there completely bewildered by her boss's bizarre, hasty exit. Seeking a private place to recover from the grueling, high-intensity workplace fitness routine, Miju locks herself inside a stall in the women's room, letting out a loud cry of pure frustration at the absolute nightmare she just endured. Now safe inside the stall, team leader Seo Miju sits, her face boiling with pure frustration as she silently reflects on how much she absolutely hates this situation. She feels deeply humiliated, questioning why on earth she had to suffer through such a grueling ordeal in front of all her colleagues. Shivering and panting from the residual effects of her previous workout, she struggles to calm her racing heart. Unable to shake off the intense training left by her invisible trainer, Miju reluctantly starts practicing her wrist curls. But her attempt to wind down is suddenly interrupted by a familiar, smug presence. From the shadows of the stall, the invisible Jungwoo reappears with a wide grin, mockingly pointing out that since she is in this state because of him, he should probably take full responsibility and finish what they started. To her absolute shock, the relentless trainer has followed her directly into the stall. Before the startled team leader can even react, Jungwoo immediately initiates another high-intensity full-body training sesh right there. Outside the room, two female employees casually stroll by, completely oblivious to the dramatic events unfolding inside. Meanwhile, deep within her stall, team leader Seo Miju is pushed to her absolute limits. Her body shakes and trembles uncontrollably as she endures a relentless, high-intensity endurance training session. Standing triumphantly behind her, our cheeky, invisible protagonist lets out a quiet chuckle. He silently advises her to keep the painful consequences of messing with him firmly in mind, making it clear that he will no longer tolerate her disrespectful behavior. Satisfied with this incredibly successful workout, Jungwoo slides open the stall door and casually steps out, leaving a completely dazed and trembling Miju to recover on her own. With a smug grin plastered across his face, Jungwoo quietly exits the room and walks back down the hallway toward his desk, thoroughly pleased with how effectively his newly awakened powers allowed him to pay her back. However, the stall is not as empty as he assumed. Just moments after the door shuts, the door of an adjacent stall slowly creaks open. Hana cautiously peeks out from hiding, her eyes wide with absolute, jaw-dropping shock. Blushing furiously and sweating from the sheer tension of what she just witnessed, she stands frozen in the middle of the room. She can only whisper his name, Han Jungwoo, in complete and utter disbelief, realizing that her seemingly invisible, low-ranking colleague is somehow the mastermind behind the team leader's bizarre state. Under the glow of a street lamp on a quiet night, Han Jungwoo walks down the pavement as the grand reality of his situation fully sinks in. He realizes with absolute clarity that his outsider power is indeed real. He reflects on his memories, vividly recalling how he can subject his arrogant boss to highly demanding, high-intensity conditioning sessions in various places, without ever having to worry about getting caught by anyone. In his mind, he is certain that after those grueling full-body training sessions, even his stubborn superior will remain completely quiet for a while. Our smug protagonist smiles to himself, realizing that this newly discovered power will not only grant him the ultimate revenge, but might even allow him to completely rewrite his entire destiny. Standing proudly outside the Ocean Square high-rise under a starry night sky, he confidently tells himself that his daily life is going to be incredibly entertaining from now on. The next day, as he strolls through the hallway, whistling a cheerful tune, he is completely oblivious to the fact that Haina is quietly hiding behind a corner, watching his every move with an intense, deeply suspicious gaze. Back at his desk inside the department, Jung-woo leans back in his chair, feeling thoroughly exhausted. He reflects on how he has spent a significant amount of his free time lately, testing the limits of his special ability, leading him to discover a few highly important rules. Experimenting in his apartment after work, he realized that his level 1 outsider mode currently has a strict limit of 2 hours per activation, automatically shutting down once the time limit is reached, followed by a necessary cooldown period before he can utilize the invisibility again. Staring at his computer screen, which displays his level 1 status, Jung-woo contemplates how he might go about developing his special gift further. He realizes that while upgrading his power is certainly possible, he has absolutely no idea how to actually trigger a level up, wondering if he needs to fulfill some highly specific hidden conditions first. As he rubs his neck and thinks back, he remembers that his toxic boss, Seo Mi-ju, was actively belittling him right when his outsider ability first awakened. Suddenly, a quiet realization hits him, and he notices that her desk has been completely silent all morning. Turning around to his cubicle neighbor, Manager Oh, Jung-woo politely inquires if the team leader is absent today. Manager Oh simply turns around, offering a knowing, slightly amused smirk in response. Looking at his smug colleague, Jung-woo can only think what an absolute douchebag Manager Oh is, realizing he should have expected nothing less from one of team leader Seo Mi-ju's loyal minions. Grinding his teeth in quiet frustration, our protagonist reflects on the harsh reality of his situation, realizing that this toxic office is actually packed with people he needs to exact his revenge on. He firmly resolves that when the perfect opportunity finally presents itself, he will make every single one of them pay. But his dark thoughts are suddenly interrupted when Haina approaches his cubicle from behind. Standing near his desk, she quietly informs him that their team leader is actually taking the day off today because she is apparently not feeling very well. Jung-woo is caught off guard, stammering out a quick acknowledgement while privately wondering if Mi-ju's sudden illness is a direct result of the incredibly rigorous conditioning session he subjected her to yesterday. Recovering his composure, he politely thanks Haina for sharing the update, to which she kindly tells him not to mention it. Just as he expects her to walk away, Haina calls out his name once more. When Jung-woo looks up, she warmly asks if she can speak with him privately for a brief moment. The scene transitions to the office break room, where the distinct sound of a vending machine dispensing a cold can of soda echoes through the quiet room. Jung-woo is slightly confused, asking if she brought him here just to buy him a drink. Kneeling down to retrieve the cans, Haina explains that she simply wanted him to take a much-needed break, handing him the cold beverage while noting that she also wanted to share some important advice with him. As Jung-woo politely thanks her, Haina delivers a sober warning, explaining that even with the team leader absent today, the other toxic employees in the department are still going to try and mistreat him. Seeing his quiet reaction, she reassures him, warmly telling him that if he ever runs into any difficulties or finds himself struggling with a task, he should always feel free to come and ask her for help. Placing a gentle, supportive hand on his chest, she looks him in the eye with a warm smile and encourages him to stay strong. After offering her warm words of encouragement, Manager Yang Haina leans in surprisingly close, tapping a gentle finger against Han Jung-woo's chest, and leaving our easily flustered protagonist completely frozen in place. Standing in the break room with his drink, Jung-woo's mind races as he recalls a helpful chat message she sent him earlier in the day. Back then, Haina had messaged him to explain that he should try to use professional business language as much as possible in his reports, even going out of her way to attach a fully revised document complete with a cute cheering sticker. Jung-woo realizes with a humbler perspective that he had mistakenly categorized Haina as just another one of team leader Seo Mi-ju's loyal minions, when in reality, she was probably just trying to survive the toxic environment by going along with the crowd. Sitting at his desk and reviewing her incredibly thorough edits, this grateful dumbass is genuinely impressed by her kindness, taking a slow sip of his soda as a newfound sense of respect for his colleague begins to grow. With his work finished early thanks to her tutoring, Jung-woo is seen walking down the office hallway with his bag, whistling a cheerful tune as he celebrates the rare luxury of leaving work exactly on time. He eagerly tells himself that he is going to crack open a cold beer the moment he gets home, but his joyful exit is suddenly interrupted when he spots Haina waiting by the elevator. Deciding to be polite, Jung-woo calls out to Manager Yang, catching her attention as she turns around in surprise. After confirming that he is indeed heading home, Jung-woo bows respectfully and expresses his deep gratitude, explaining that he was only able to finish his tasks on time because of her generous assistance. Haina offers a soft, pleased smile, clearly happy to see her junior colleague showing such sincere appreciation. Curious about his plans, Haina asks if he is heading straight back to his apartment, prompting our awkward protagonist to scratch his ear and admit that he is just going to pick up some dinner on his way home. Seeing an opportunity to unwind, Haina gets a playful look on her face and points out that going home so early on a nice night would be an absolute waste, warmly inviting him out for a round of drinks on her tab. Shortly after, the pair arrives at a cozy local pub, clinking their overflowing beer mugs together in a cheerful toast. As they settle in, Haina takes a satisfying drink and points out that this is actually their very first time sharing a drink together, noting that she has never once seen him attend any of their department's official team dinners. While Youngwoo lets out a nervous chuckle, Haina sighs in frustration and candidly complains about how mean and shallow their office environment is, explaining that everyone else is merely pretending to be hostile just to appease their demanding team leader. She reassures the anxious young man that he is actually not bad at his job at all, suggesting that the team leader simply holds everyone to completely unrealistic and overbearing standards. Jungwoo agrees with a relieved smile, listening as Haina notes that Miju is likely just projecting her own obsessive work ethic onto everyone else. Although Jungwoo sheepishly acknowledges that he still has a massive amount of skills to learn, Haina playfully pouts and teases him for being so modest right after she went through the trouble of standing up for him. Looking at his kind colleague, our soft-hearted protagonist is deeply touched, realizing that this is the very first time in his life he has ever spent genuine, comfortable time with a coworker. With a warm smile on his face, he looks down at his glass and softly apologizes for his initial awkwardness, fully embracing the rare warmth of a true friend in his otherwise cold professional life. Resting her chin on her hand, a slightly tipsy Haina admits to Jungwoo that she truly regrets not taking better care of him in the office sooner. She explains that their team leader, Seo Miju, has a notoriously fiery and difficult personality, revealing that she herself suffered quite a lot in the past whenever she dared to go against her superior's wishes. Jungwoo is genuinely surprised to learn this, listening intently as Haina confesses that even though she knew the office bullying was wrong, she felt she had absolutely no choice but to go along with the team leader's demands just to protect herself. Looking at him with deep sympathy, she gently notes how incredibly difficult things must have been for him lately. Brushing off her concerns with a warm smile, Jungwoo places his beer glass back down on the table, reassuring her that he has already learned how to handle workplace hostility. He adds that simply knowing there is someone as kind and supportive as her on their team is more than enough to make him feel better, letting out a bright, genuine laugh. Touched by his positive attitude and resilience, Haina's eyes soften as she smiles warmly back at him. Placing her hand gently over her heart, she sincerely thanks him for saying such sweet and reassuring words. Stepping out of the pub, the cool night air greets them as they begin walking down the quiet, illuminated streets together. Noticing the drop in temperature, Jungwoo politely asks Haina if she is heading toward the subway station or if she would prefer for him to call a taxi to take her home safely. Instead of answering right away, Haina playfully ponders what she should do, admitting that she is simply having too much fun tonight to end the evening just yet. She points out that the late-night buses have already stopped running and almost all of the nearby restaurants are closed, before casually turning to him and noting that he mentioned living quite close to this area. This unexpected remark catches our clueless protagonist completely off guard, leaving this dumbass stammering in absolute shock as he tries to process what she is implying. Haina simply smiles, looking incredibly charming under the streetlights as they continue walking side by side down the pavement, their hands nearly brushing. Stepping slightly ahead of him, she turns back with a highly inviting and playful pose, directly asking how he feels about taking the party back to his place. Later in a conditioning session, Jungwoo finds himself completely caught off guard as Haina drops a massive bombshell, revealing that she knows exactly what happened in the workplace with team leader Seo Miju a couple of days ago. Sweating profusely, our startled protagonist can only stammer in shock as Haina calmly explains that she heard absolutely everything. Standing before him completely unbothered, Haina bluntly makes it clear that she has no personal interest in his private training life or who he chooses to engage with. She further notes that she does not care about his invisible status at the company, nor does she care that their toxic boss constantly berates him in public. Hearing this cold confession, the helpless Jungwoo is left utterly bewildered, desperately wondering what her true motives could possibly be. As she paces around him, Haina points out that although Miju absolutely loathed him, the haughty team leader submitted to his strange actions far too easily, which immediately aroused her suspicion. To uncover his secret, Haina admits that she deliberately put on a kind, supportive facade to lower his guard and gain his trust. With a smug, calculating grin, she finally reveals her ultimate goal, stating that she wants to know exactly what kind of blackmail or leverage he is using against their team leader. She explains that she initially expected him to spill all of his secrets if she treated him with a little bit of warmth, but was left frustrated because this gullible idiot was either too clever to fall for her trick or simply too clueless to realize what she was doing. To force his hand, Haina holds up her smartphone, revealing a highly humiliating and sussy photo she took of Jungwoo bound to a chair during their conditioning session. She coldly advises him that it would be in his best interest to tell her the absolute truth immediately, unless he wants every single employee at the company to see him in such an unsightly and embarrassing state. With a malicious smirk, she taunts him that while leaking the photo would make his professional life infinitely worse, it would certainly be highly amusing for her to watch him suffer. Left completely paralyzed and shivering in his bindings, Jungwoo grinds his teeth in pure, suffocating humiliation, finally realizing with absolute clarity that this backstabbing woman has simply been playing with him like a toy from the very beginning. Just as his feelings of betrayal and anger reach their absolute peak, a glowing blue digital screen suddenly materializes before his eyes, declaring that the extreme disdain he is facing has officially reached its absolute limit. With a satisfying chime, the system announces that his outsider mode has successfully leveled up. Consumed by an overwhelming surge of raw fury, Jungwoo lets out a deafening, rage-filled scream at the deceitful woman, letting his pent-up resentment explode. Instantly, another holographic prompt flashes in the air, confirming that a powerful new ability has officially been unlocked, setting the stage for a dramatic turning point. As a bright morning sun rises over the Grand Ocean Square high-rise, the bustling daily commute is already in full swing inside a heavily crowded subway car. Riding among the tightly packed passengers is a smug Haina, who is currently engrossed in her phone, staring at the highly sussy photo of a bound Han Jungwoo. She confidently tells herself that this absolute nightmare won't just end with Jungwoo getting fired from his job, but that his entire life will be completely ruined. Smiling maliciously at her screen, she reflects that if this gullible idiot had any real pride, he never would have tolerated such intense disrespect for this long. She is absolutely certain that he will eventually crawl back to her to beg for mercy, though she fully intends to break his stubborn arrogance first. In her vivid, self-indulgent daydream, Haina imagines a humiliated Jungwoo down on his knees, desperately begging at her high-heeled feet to save his career. She tells herself that once she finally extracts the secret leverage he holds over team leader Seo Miju, she will go ahead and leak his sussy photos to the entire company anyway. A wicked, satisfied grin spreads across her face as she stands in the train car, quietly admitting to herself that she is getting incredibly excited just imagining the look of absolute despair on his face when his world finally crumbles. Her dark fantasies are suddenly interrupted by the automated train announcement, confirming that they are arriving at the next station as the screen doors slowly glide open. As the massive crowd of passengers begins shifting and pushing past each other to exit, Haina stands near the doorway, waiting for her stop. However, as the crowd presses tightly against her, her eyes suddenly widen in pure, unadulterated shock. Flinching in surprise, she lets out a sharp, uneasy breath, completely frozen in place by an unexpected feeling. Annoyed by the intrusion, Haina tells herself that she is starting her day with terrible luck, realizing with mounting disgust that an incredibly bold molester has targeted her on the crowded train. To her absolute horror, a mysterious, transparent hand begins initiating a highly aggressive, blatant conditioning session, firmly grabbing her bag with zero regard for her boundaries. Deeply violated, she internally curses the crazy bastard and instantly spins around in a rage, loudly demanding to know where they think they are touching. But as she gasps and prepares to confront her attacker, her anger instantly turns to absolute bewilderment, finding only a crowd of ordinary commuters who are completely minding their own business. Left staring in confusion, she realizes there is absolutely no visible culprit in sight. Looking back at the crowded train car, a sweating and deeply unsettled Haina is completely bewildered, wondering why there is absolutely nobody standing directly behind her despite the very clear touch in the bag she just felt. Her confusion is suddenly interrupted when a familiar face approaches, as Manager O politely calls her name and remarks that it is quite a surprise to run into her on their morning commute. As Manager O casually asks if she is on her way to work, Haina quickly tries to compose herself, greeting her senior colleague while her mind frantically races. She wonders if Manager O was actually the sneaky culprit who touched her bag earlier, but immediately dismisses the thought since he is standing directly in front of her. Little does this backstabbing snake know, the completely invisible Han Jungwoo is standing right behind her, wearing a smug, malicious grin as he prepares to put his newly unlocked powers to the test. While Manager O continues their polite conversation, casually noting that he didn't know she also rode subway, line 2, Jungwoo decides that it is the perfect time to initiate his revenge. Without warning, Haina's eyes widen in absolute terror as she gasps, feeling a sudden and highly aggressive training session pressing firmly against her hands. She instantly realizes with mounting panic that this relentless conditioning routine is definitely not being performed by Manager O, especially since her colleague is standing right before her eyes. As the phantom hands intensify their relentless fitness conditioning, Haina is completely horrified to find that she is also being subjected to a powerful full-body conditioning session, finding herself held so tightly from behind that she can barely move her body at all. Struggling to keep her composure as the invisible Jungwoo whispers mockingly behind her ear, she bites her lip in intense fluster, completely at the mercy of this silent, high-intensity workplace fitness routine. Standing just inches away, Jungwoo smugly reflects on how beautifully his plan is working, noting that even if she tries to scream for help, everyone on the crowded train, including the oblivious Manager O, will simply think she has completely lost her mind.